Click on chat.
So
thank
one of the
you.
things we put in there earlier was like, what label are you using? SDiT, SD, so service dog in training or service dog. The reason I would kind of want to start there is I think it's going to kind of go through life skills here this way, different life stages. So this one comes up in groups all the time. And I think it has to be based on a couple of different things. For me, I want it to take into account what are my state laws. That's an easy one. But for two, it also needs to accommodate. This is at least how I advise my clients. It needs to deal with the handler and what their comfort level is, kind of what Patty had said earlier in reference to Lulu. Are you comfortable with being challenged? Do you feel like your qualifications are good enough? And so I think that's something people need to consider when they're looking at, should my dog be labeled a service dog in training versus a service dog? Because
you will be challenged.
Well, and that's
you'll be asked that.
We're in a state that doesn't have in training access. So my particular state doesn't have in training access.
We don't?
No,
my
we
dog
don't.
Would be, I would have
Hold on, listen to the conversation, Emma, because you'll end up getting there. So my state doesn't have in training access. But what my state adamantly says is this is the definition of a service dog, and it's the ADA definition. So handler that's disabled and the dog has under control at all times, at least one task, and potty trained. So honestly, Azul hit that at 5 months old.
So did Nick.
And I actually called ADA with that question.
Right.
That because of states, I called them. Somebody was saying their dog was like a 6-month-old and a service dog. And I'm saying, well, you can't be. Now, our group, when we look at that, we have ethics that say, at least before 12 months old, your working dogs are a different thing than what we're discussing. But what the question was, what is the age that my puppy can be considered fully under my control age-wise? And the lady she said, there's not any age here, that it's only based on that, on the definition. She said, just that.
Well, I mean, it's easy to
control.
control
I can have a puppy that does it. And she said she wouldn't even go there. She just says it's not got anything to do with age. She wouldn't even discuss whether a puppy could or not.
Well, and that's why I think you kind of have to layer in that what is the human comfortable with? Because was Azul done training at 6 months old? No way. Would I have said he qualified for the state license? No. Well, I mean, I would say he's definitely, like, for the most part, done training, other than the maintenance training that happens for the lifetime. I might be fine-tuning a couple of his advanced tasks, but he's got, I don't know, something like 9-10 tasks. So I don't worry about those last couple that might still be fine-tuning. But so basically, he met the ADA definition at 5 to 6 months old. Did I think that meant he was good in all environments? No way. Did I think that?
Well, that's the under control part.
Right. And so did I think that meant I could begin then in Michigan, according to the law, start taking him into places that were not pet friendly? As long as I was doing that smartly and going to the smaller places first and building him up. And so that's where I advise my clients that I work with that are training dogs is you need to feel comfortable in that your dog has the skills for the environment you're putting them in, no matter what label you have on them. I don't care if you're labeling them as in training or labeling them as a full service dog. You as the handler have to be comfortable with the skills for the environment you're putting them in.
But the question, whether you can say yes or no at the door in a state like you're in, Penny, you've got to be able to know that you got the task trained. And I'm not going to, at that point, go in a place I don't have that younger dog under control, or they're going to kick me out. That doesn't mean it's not a service dog. But with a service dog in training, I'm fine with some behavior I'm not fine with the service dog. And I got a big training tag on Rainey when we went back and after we lost Shy. And sometimes I would say, we're working on this, or she's in training. People, they cut you a lot more slack than if you've got a service dog tag on.
Well, I noticed because like Wisconsin right below us and Illinois that I visit frequently, both have in training status. And everybody there, my phone's going in and out again. But so everybody there is in agreement with you that they just feel more comfortable, even if an older dog is struggling for some reason, to put the in training patches back on.
You don't feel like the public's expecting as much
But in
from you, I
Michigan,
think
the
is what it
public
is.
doesn't expect anything anyways.
Well, if I was
So
in
it's whether you
Michigan,
meet the state law or not,
you just have
which
either
is the
one.
ADA law.
Well, yeah, if I lived in Michigan
Mhm.
and here, if I wasn't comfortable going in, they changed our law. We have to be a professional trainer. It doesn't define it, or be a volunteer for a professional trainer. And my trainer said, you know, if you're not comfortable, just tell them you're with me. So I'm okay, but say I wasn't.
Right.
I'd go ahead and my dog, as soon as he could retrieve, we'd be going in there and I could say, yes, he has a test.
Yeah.
But
Unfortunately,
I'm
not
not going to do that because I can go in and let him be more comfortable and me give more direction with him. And so it's got to me to do with, will that state let me in public
Right.
with my dog in training? And that really affects when that tag comes off for me.
I totally agree.
I agree, Patty, but I think they're still technically they're in training. So if they, well, they still are in training and you're going to get more slack with the in training tags on. That dog still needs to have the tasks though, I think, so that they meet the minimum. So you can answer the yes, they do know that, but we're still working on some things.
So I do live in Michigan, which apparently doesn't allow service dogs in training, which is very funny to me because I didn't know that. And I have a vest that literally has service dog in training patches that I bought, and I've never had an issue, even though I've gone into places I don't think they would accept a regular dog.
And you won't
you have a
because
tag?
of our area. You won't get any access issues with it. It's not covered under the state law. But the local business owners do not know that. They have no clue what the state law is.
However,
like the
food
state
places,
law,
there are laws in the state about food places. And if you don't have access under state law with a service dog in training, I would probably use care, because a restaurant and those grocery stores, depending on state law, can't let a dog in there that's not a service dog.
Right. Even though they're going to up here, but it could come back against them. The thing is, Emma,
but I
your
meet
dog,
the state law definition.
Keep in mind, I've
very
never
easily.
met her dog. I've only talked to her on Zoom and whatnot. Gonna meet him soon though. But from my understanding and the way you've described him, he meets the ADA definition and you would be fine to take him in.
Very much.
He's older, he's under control all the time. He's potty trained and he is task trained, even if you have any more tasks. So, I mean, lots of people that I work with feel more comfortable in the state of Michigan with the in training patches. It doesn't have any legal merit. So I contacted the state specifically to ask them about this because their state laws are so wacky. But they said they don't care how you patch your dog. If you meet ADA, you meet ADA. So
if you do or you don't.
Legally you do. If you meet ADA, you meet state law. So they don't care if you have an in-training patch on, because if you meet the ADA requirements, you can be in that public place. So you don't have to worry about changing your patches if they make you feel more comfortable. I found it kind of freeing at like 6 months old to remove those in training patches, even though everybody, like anywhere I went in at that point, my big places, let's see, we do so much training in pet friendly places. So I'm trying to think of, so I think I took him into Walgreens. I took him into a doctor's appointment, so into the hospital, but I had prior approval. So the doctor's office knew he was coming already because they knew I had been training him all the way up to that point. They had also met my last service dog in that doctor's office. So they were comfortable in my skills and handling abilities. And so I took the patches off early because he met the ADA requirement, and it was just easier because it's the other service dog handlers in the state that will complain that there isn't in training access. And you've probably never ran into another service dog handler. Because your area, she lives up here really close to me. So rural Michigan, like I said earlier, we have maybe 5 service dogs in this county and a few that pass by in the summer here and there. You might have maybe 10 in your county, maybe. And being Marquette, she's in the biggest city in her county, and she's probably more likely to run into a service dog there more than I am. But honestly, unless it's somebody that I set up an appointment with, I probably only run into a service dog maybe 3 times a year. So I think there's one client that I've ran into in the store twice, and I've been working with her for over a year. So we've met more often than that for training visits, but we've only accidentally ran into each other twice. So you're going to have that same kind of thing. It's going to be rare. But
I rarely run into service dogs here, even though, I mean, it's definitely bigger than your area.
so do we have any other tips or tricks, and like, I guess not really tricks because that's the wrong word. But so if
Maybe.
somebody is questioning, do I remove that label? What other criteria do you base that decision on? Based on what, or besides what we've already discussed?
I think
Being state law and handler comfort, and
to me, it also depends on where you're going. So last year I wasn't super comfortable with Nick around other dogs. We were having we were having significant problems around other dogs. And we also were going to Hoover Dam. It's a national recreation area for the Colorado River. And so we wanted to go in and see Hoover Dam while we were there. So Nick had a task. He'd had a task for a year by that point, but I'd been labeling him as a service dog in training the entire time because he had some issues that I was working on, but we wanted to go in and see the dam. So I took him in. I took his in training patches off and just put service dog patches on just to go in for the dam. And there were no other dogs there. I figured there wouldn't be any dogs, and that was his big issue at that point in time. And he also does 100% better in a crowded area than he does if it's just a random person walking by. So we were walking on the dam, and there's all these people. So it was really nice because he was just, oh, okay, I'm supposed to be right between you guys, and I'm right between you guys, and I'm not acting up. And he did fine. But so, it might, if I'm doing something like that, where I'm going to a federal area or a state park, or a national park, something that's regulated by the ADA, and there's no additional state protections, and there's no state regulations that are affected by it, which would be BLM land for, national parks, things of that nature, then I would take the in training patches off, just because it confuses the gatekeepers.
Yeah, if you're in a national park, you're not coming in with the training patch on.
Nope. Although they might have, when I went to Yosemite, the ranger, so they have it set up really well. So when you're about to go on the trail with your dog, they have rangers there guarding the gate, and they have a laminated card with the 2 ADA questions on it. And they asked me the 2 questions, and I could answer the questions, which was, is he a service dog required because of a disability? And I said, yes. And what's his task? And I said, retrieving dropped items. And they said, okay, you're good to go. And then they told me that my national parks pass was equivalent to a handicap park or handicap parking pass. And we got to go park up closer to the sequoias to go hike around there. So it was actually a huge benefit. And he didn't really, I guess he had service dog patches on that day. He had a lot of stuff. He had too much stuff on that day. But, you know, you don't, if you're going on a federal, on anything federal, I think if you're going to take your dog in there and your dog meets the basic requirements, I think you're better off pulling off the in training and just sticking.
Because
The regular.
ADA doesn't cover in training.
Yeah.
Correct.
They aren't going to let you in. You don't have to have a patch at all. I mean, as far as that
No,
goes.
you don't have
Even
to.
Here, probably 50% of the time, we're out with the little Pet Safe 3-in-1 harness on him, and sometimes I'll throw a collar on. The only reason I'll put a harness on him that's different is when I want him to feel different. You know, like if we're going into a place where I want him to understand you don't get to pet everybody. You know, we kind of started with that there, but it's my trainer doesn't care either if she's got a patch on. She's well known around here, and she brings puppies and dogs, and the only thing that she makes a difference in is like he's going to have a mobility harness on, and that's something that I'm starting to have him feel. When you're wearing a different feeling harness, you don't get to
Play.
pet people and stuff and act
Yeah.
like we did when you were 4 months old.
Right, it's
Ashlyn
time to
puts
throw
in
it.
the chat that she uses like the CGC when your dog can pass the CGC. It may be a good time to take off the in training passes. Not that that's a required test, she wants to point out, but that's like her defining when they can pass that.
That's yes and no. Nick has an issue with huskies, and he was taking the CGC, and he would have passed it, except we got too close to a husky, and the husky was kind of out of control, and so Nick decided he was going to be out of control, and I managed to get him past the dog, and we'll do it again, but
One
on
of these
the-
days,
but-
we're going to make Nick love huskies as much as Azul loves poodles.
I know. But anyways.
You should have a girl dog. All the boys love the girl dogs. Rainy, everybody loves Rainy, and she just walks around and
Well,
owns.
everybody loves Poe, and she's a big cuddle bunny, but Nick he's always been a little standoffish, and the huskies around here tend to not be too well behaved, and they tend to stare. And he does not like, he's rude and he stares, and he does not like to be stared at.
Yep, Azul stares.
So that's what his issue is.
That is a definite husky trait. They like
Well-
to watch, and it's not necessarily a hardcore, like challenging stare that, in dog body language, some dogs do that stare that is a challenge stare. Huskies just like to watch.
There's a lot of bully breeds around here that do that too. I just avoid them because there's one that's in our class that doesn't like Nick, and Nick doesn't like it. So we just sit on opposite sides of the class, and it's not a problem.
But that's another valid point. It's like my dog doesn't have to be best friends with every dog out there.
Nope,
He needs to
that's-
maintain his manners at a distance that's safe.
Well, what I've always said is he doesn't have to like everybody. He just has to tolerate.
Right.
And I'm like Penny, I'm not getting close to somebody's dog anyway, unless I know you.
Right.
Yeah, exactly.
Right.
I don't trust other dogs. My dogs are too soft, and I've had too many bad things happen from leash dogs.
Yeah. No, I totally agree. Unless I know the dog and the handler, more importantly, the handler, and know how they're going to act.
Right.
But we hang around a group of dogs that I trust all the handlers, and the dogs are all related. Nick's the only poodle, the rest are labs.
His training partner's a lab. Rachel's dog, she's got a dog a month older than him, and that's good. I know the dogs, it's hers, and that's
Yep.
fine. But nobody I don't know.
Right. So anything else to add to another criteria that you like to use in determining when you take off the in training patches?
I'd have said when my dog is perfect, but that's probably not realistic. So I listen to these.
He's a
Our
dog, he's
dogs
not a
are not
robot.
perfect ever.
I'd have said like when every bad situation I can envision that I think would most challenge my dog, like when I know that he can handle all of those.
Okay, so I
Okay,
thought
like
Poe could handle
That's my-
everything. And then we went to Las Vegas and we went to Siegfried and Roy's Secret Garden. And we got to see the tigers, the lions, the jaguars. And the tiger was about the same age as Poe was at the time, and he did not like her. And he wanted to eat her. And mind you, this dog's parents were from a working alpaca farm, and they kept the cougars out of the alpaca herd. So she's not from wimpy stock. And she was trying to get me out of there as quickly as she could. So then we went over and watched the dolphins, and she sat with her back towards me, staring at the gate where we had come out from the cats, just watching to see if a cat was coming out.
That'd be a scary cat.
Yeah. Me
Running
too.
scared of little kitties. That would probably send her up the wall.
So that was kind of like, okay, we need to get out of here. But I mean, I can handle her freaking out over a tiger. You know, that's a
Well,
legitimate
and that's
thing.
just it. You're never going to have every single environment because there's
No.
always going to be that exceptional, that exception environment, one that you don't encounter day to day. That's not in your
Mhm.
normal community. Like, there's one thing a lot of people do, and if they live close by to an amusement park and want to take their service dog, no, I have no problem with anybody who's doing it. But me, my family, we like to go to Cedar Point, which is in Sandusky, Ohio. It's family tradition kind of thing. There's no way I would consider taking Azul there. For one, the whole line swap with another family member would just be more annoying. He'd much rather be, with a friend or family member playing with their dog for the day than waiting in and out of those lines. He would overheat. He would just be miserable. So, but if I had decided that I wanted to take him in that environment, I think that would be too much for him because he's never been in that big of a place, that many crowds, plus the roller coasters, plus the time, like he spends a lot of time away from me. And we do a lot of I pass him off to other family members or other dog handlers that I know well. Like Maverick's handler, me and Shauna will pass our dogs back and forth all the time because it's good for them to practice that. But to do it all day long while I'm enjoying roller coasters doesn't seem fair to him.
No,
I just
but
simply wouldn't do it.
one thing you have to consider though, Penny, is like the people that go to Disney or Six Flags Magic Mountain, or they probably live close enough that they're in a crowd like that most of the time when they go out in public, because you go to the mall and you're in a crowd like that. Like I showed you that video of Nick working in the street fair that one day.
Mm-hmm.
And you said that's way more crowded than what it would ever be
Here.
in your area. And that's like nothing for here.
Well, and that's just it. I mean, since I go to Illinois, I do see the bigger crowds, and Azul works a lot in some bigger crowds occasionally, and they don't tend to bother him. But for this kind of situation, the environmental awareness, there's always going to be some environment you didn't think you would ever go to, and your dog may not have perfect manners in that environment simply because it's not something you ever trained or anticipated. So that kind of goes back to Emma's, when my dog can do everything I can think of, there's always going to be something you didn't.
There's always something. I mean, one of the things that came up for Poe, not for Nick, because I didn't have Nick, was we went down to Lemoore Naval Air Station because the Blue Angels were down there. And I opted not to take Poe because it was going to be really hot and I didn't want her to overheat with her fur. And I didn't think she would, even though she's flown and she's heard jets, I didn't really think that having the Blue Angels flying overhead, at 100 feet would be that fantastic for her. But
And Ashley says that she's taken Lily into Silver Dollar City, which is fairly big tourist kind of thing too. So yeah, I
Yeah.
get that people do it. I don't have any problem with people doing it. It's just a matter of you have to think about that before any environment with a service dog. So I wouldn't base that on whether my dog is wearing in training patches or not in training patches, because there's always going to be that exception. I guess that was my point.
This,
yeah, whether they can handle it or not.
here's a follow-up question. I know we've been talking about this, but I suspect that my dog is going to get to what I would consider service dog levels here in Marquette, which is technically a city, but more rural. But if I go to visit San Francisco, I think it would be in training, because I've lived there, and I don't think it's as busy now with the pandemic as it used to be, but I remember like getting on public transit during rush hour, where people are literally like bumping, like there's no space whatsoever between you and everyone else, and like I don't.
That's really hard
Well,
for a
There are just
service
things
dog.
over there that I don't think I'm going to encounter over
I
here.
went to I don't live that close to San Francisco. I don't go very often because
Yeah,
I
I never left. I never left the city when I lived there. So
I like a lot of the stuff around San Francisco, but there's stuff about San Francisco I don't like. But I lived in Portland for many years, and I went back up there last summer, and I used public transportation the whole time I was up there. And to me, it did seem a little bit less crowded. So, and it wasn't bad to get around. I imagine San Francisco is somewhat the same, but I think the homeless situation is probably the same too. So,
Yeah, this
My first time ever in San Francisco, I got like almost fined $150 because Izzy peed on the sidewalk.
on the sidewalk.
Yeah, apparently they're not allowed to pee on the sidewalk because they don't want the homeless people to think it's okay to pee on the sidewalk.
What?
Perfectly.
Yeah, that was my first and
Good
only
reason.
time in San Francisco. The cop came up to me and he's like, I'm going to give you a warning this time, but next time you're going to get fined. And I'm like, I'm from Maine. We don't have
Sorry.
these laws here.
right.
It was just really weird to me.
what's a good thing he didn't come up catch me when I had my boys pee against a building in the middle of Portland because they really had to go after a bike ride.
We just got off a 6-hour flight and Izzy had to go. And then they were like, well, if you go 3 miles down this way, there's a dog park. And I'm like,
3 miles.
She just got
We-
off
we
an
just got-
airplane.
6-hour flight. She's not going to kill anything. But yeah, he did warn us. And I was like, okay, I'm probably not coming back to San Francisco for a while.
Well, and I
We ended
have
up
heard
going up to the
handlers
redwoods.
like in New York say that they specifically work with their dog to like stand over a sewer drain to pee. I'm like, I really can't imagine needing to do that, being in that kind of environment. Although I think Azul would gladly do it because he'll pee pretty
Nick
much
would.
anywhere I ask him to. But I can't imagine having that be part of your day-to-day life where every time you take the dog out, you're guiding them to a sewer drain.
That's interesting. I wonder if they would care in San Francisco if you let your dog like pee in the sewer drain.
Yeah,
Probably
'cause I mean,
not.
the homeless could pee there too. They probably
I
want
wanna-
to
I wanna
discourage
test
that
that
too.
theory.
It depends. We have all
I
these
guess
signs.
I don't.
We have all these signs on our sewers on what not to put down the drain. And I think that's one of the things not to put down the drain because it goes into our ponding basins, which are used to refill wells and to house waterfowl. So it might
Probably don't
matter.
want pee down the drain. Yeah, that
No.
could be a big debate, from whatever town you're in. But that's kind of good to think about too when you're traveling with a service dog. Know the laws for the area you're traveling in. Not
Worst case
just
scenario,
access laws, but
Oh, yeah.
the other nuances.
But you can, what do you say about having them pee on a bush?
You know, I
they
wouldn't have
weren't
ever
allowed
thought
to.
of that. I live in the South. My dog would have peed on a bush.
My other friend, her dog peed under a bush, and they literally told her to. They're like, "Your dog can't do that. You're gonna get arrested." And we're like,
Shocking.
"We can't let them
This is-
pee on grass or under a bush."
This is
And then-
actually weird to me because I have
Have certain areas, and I'm like, whatever. Other
I'll keep
handlers,
my mouth shut before I get in trouble.
they
Well,
said that
come to the
that's not
South. The humans pee on bushes here.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we do too.
same here.
Go ahead,
Yeah.
Emma.
I'm not
Oh,
used to
I
this
just-
law.
I don't know if that was also in San Francisco, but I had friends with pet dogs and I know where they lived and like no one has a yard. Most of the sidewalks have like maybe if you're lucky on the street, they might have like a spare tree surrounded by cement. Like there's a hole in the cement where the tree comes out of. Like there's no grass. I know they definitely weren't. No one has a car. They weren't taking their
Yeah,
dog to
it's
public transit because
mostly
it was a pet.
just
Like I don't
sidewalk.
know. And they never complained about anything. I didn't specifically ask like, is your dog allowed to go to the bathroom outside? But
Well, I asked other handlers who live in San Fran, and they said that's not a law. And then the cop was like, "You can't do that." And I was like, "But we were told." I wonder if it's because they realized we weren't from California or San Francisco, and they were just giving us a hard time. But now I'm just scared to let Izzy pee on the sidewalk in San
Or
Francisco.
maybe it was the particular couple of blocks you were in, not the whole
Yeah, it
town.
could be just where
It's
you
hard to
were
say.
in the city.
were you in the Tenderloin?
We were where it was really crazy small streets.
Near an
And,
airport
like,
because you
were
just
you
got
in the
off a
Hague?
flight.
Were you
Oh
in
no,
the
this was after we left the
Oh.
airport. We had stopped at PetSmart, and then we were just leaving PetSmart, and we stopped at another store, and we figured, okay, there's like a little bush next to this sidewalk,
Seems
You
like
know?
a good place.
and then we almost got in trouble, and I was like, he said it was okay because I wasn't from there, that he was just gonna give us a warning, and I'm like, okay, I won't let her pee on the sidewalk. Then we went inside PetSmart again, and they're like, I don't know if there's a law about that here, but we have a designated area behind the store. And I'm like, oh, okay. It was really weird. California is weird to me. And then you go to Los Angeles and the cops like, the homeless people pee everywhere. Your dog can pee. Because I asked the cop there, I was like, I don't want to get in trouble. And he's like, they can pee anywhere. The homeless guys pee everywhere. And I'm like, oh,
That's what happens in San Francisco, and that's what happens in Portland. They pee everywhere.